Namaste and welcome to this edition of The Right Stand. I'm Anand Narasimhan. Ladies and gentlemen, at the top half of this show, we're going to focus on the speech delivered to the entire grouping of the Communist Party of China by Xi Jinping as he looks all set for a third term. A third term that perhaps after Mao, he's the only other leader to do it. Does that make him the great leader? Does that put him in the legion of Mao as he so wants to be? Because unlike any other leaders in the recent past of the CCP, Xi Jinping has focused and tried to model himself on the ideals of Mao. There are also goals that have been set. 2027, centenary of the PLA, founding day of the PLA, 100 years of the PLA. And of course 2049, which is 100 years of the CCP. Will Xi Jinping 100 years of CCP in power in China. So that's the 2049 goal. But many say he's advanced it by about 15 years to 2035. So the next 10, 15 years, ladies and gentlemen, are going to be critical in the way the CCP tries to push its way through. There will be impact on Bharat and of course globally, where many believe that the powers of America are on the wane and there is a new global order. So we'll try and decode this victory speech, and we've been able to also access government sources, intel sources who've listened to every word of what he said over those 104 minutes. And they've tried to say that be it tone, be it language, or be it vocabulary, there is a lot to be understood based on what he has said, what he has implied, and what he has not said but shown. So the aggression abroad, control at home, that is something which is evident in that speech. Strong language on American interference on Taiwan, and him talking about the reunification of Taiwan. He has very clearly said, but he's also said, we'll never commit to the abandoning of use of force. So that means that aspect, that military might and the use of force, that angle aspect remains. So what is implied on Taiwan, does that not also imply on Xinjiang? Does that also not imply on Taiwan, on Tibet? And then what does that mean? Reserve the option to take all necessary measures is what he has said. Hong Kong situation has moved from chaos to governance. So when full annexation happens and total control is taken, then that means there is governance. That's the projection that he is making. Continuity theme, harsh control and propagation, apparatus and policies. So that is something which is a continuity from his 2017 speech. Heavy emphasis on political loyalty. You remain committed to me, you survive. There are lots who have fallen by the wayside under this entire aspect of crackdown on corruption, ladies and gentlemen. Now, where does this all stand and how is it different from his 2017 speech? Let's try and understand that. The address and of course the India message. There are three big stresses that have happened. There is the security aspect that he's spoken about. He's talked about PLA modernization and also core interests. 104-minute speech, unlike the nearly 3-hour speech the last time around in 2017. Now in security, he has mentioned this word security 73 times. Separate section on national security, and the takeaway is renewed thrust on security establishment, safeguarding China's dignity and core interests. What does that mean when you talk about PLA modernization? Flaunting military prowess. And of course, he has spoken about the strengthening the claims at the line of actual control. Galwan 2A. There is a related video at the event that was shown and it was circulated in mainstream media, and this was about one of those military commanders, Chief Abao, who was toasted, and he was one of the guys at Galwan. So that means that fire is still not doused. That's what the interpretation that's being made also closer home here is. Core interests, momentous changes accelerating worldwide. Significant shift in international balance of power, he says. It presents China with strategic opportunities. So what should be the takeaway? Is it collaboration or intensified conflict? It can be either ways. Dynamic zero COVID policy. The border controls are not to be relaxed yet because he has underlined its zero COVID policy of China is working for them. That means there will be hardship for Indian students who had to come back, and of course businesses who are continuing to suffer because they said we will be nowhere but China. Now the world over businesses are saying ABC, that is anywhere but China, ladies and gentlemen. But is this speech, should this also set the warning bells ringing for India? That's the question that we are asking. Why should there be warning bells for India? Because is it conflict or collaboration? Somewhere the aggression in the tone, the way he is talking about security aspects and protecting China's core interests as defined by the CCP point to the fact that we should be ready for an intensified amount of conflict, although the dynamic could be different. Let's try and ask our experts, where do they stand? And they've been following, they've been watching China and also Xi's machinations for a while now. Sushant Singh, Senior Fellow, ORF, is with us. Sana Hashmi, Visiting Fellow, Taiwan Asia Exchange Foundation, is with us this evening. Andrew K.P. Leung, International and Independent China Strategist. He's based in Hong Kong, which Xi Jinping believes has got far greater governance and less chaos now. Dr. Roger Liu, Associate Professor at Flame University, and he knows a thing or two about what Xi has said and how to read in between the lines. But I'm going to start with Sana Hashmi and ask her, Sana, how would you interpret Xi Jinping's speech? And with respect to India, are we looking at far more greater turmoil and tumultuous times? Or is it going to be that which will be transactional?
I think there is, as you also mentioned, there is continuity in his approach, specifically on the foreign policy front. The focus is going to be on security, but with India, I feel that the relations are not going to be normalized. It's, of course, already not business as usual. But I think this is what we are also going to see, because the new normal was already established when Xi Jinping first came to power. And I believe for him to acquire the third term would mean that China will be more assertive and bold in its approach, and India has been one of the major victims of China's aggression. So I believe the relations are only going to go downhill after she secures the third term. And I think India needs to brave itself for more problems with China in times to come.
Why do you say that? Why do you say that, Sana Hashmi? Why should there be more problems? And what kind of problems?
I think it's because this is what was established, and this is one of the USPs of Xi's term. And at home, China and Xi Jinping, it has been established as a bold and confident country that's standing up to the bullies. And India being a part of the quadrilateral dialogue, and with India-US partnership, I believe India is also being seen as an adversary. So I think on the border, India has to prepare itself for more problems, and generally as well. So I don't think India is getting any China's accommodative behavior, going to see China's accommodative behavior at the border. So I think India has to be firm with its approach, and India needs to prepare itself that it has to have more problems. It has to have more standoffs with China.
Dr. Roger Liu, he is very, very strongly worded on Taiwan, where he is committed to reunification. He's also said we will not stop or reconsider or give up the use of force. Largely, everybody thought that China wanted to win Taiwan or annex Taiwan without firing a single bullet or a single missile. It's just the psychological pressure built up. How would you read the speech?
I think specifically
question to Dr. Roger Liu, Sanaji. Yeah.
If we look at the text itself, you will find that actually it's quite similar to what he has said before. He do not rule out the option of using force, but the Chinese side will resort, as most likely, to peace. This is the main theme and the main tune of the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda machine. But what has changed for the past few years is that actually the PLA, after the reorganization after the end of 2016, it has become much stronger. And for the past few decades, they have been emulating their biggest enemy. And also, the PLA is the biggest fan of the U.S. armed forces. So they are trying to adopt the U.S. strategy and tactics. But, according to a lot of experts in military affairs, the PLA now has the ability to deny the U.S. Rescuing forces for Taiwan in the years to come. So what has changed is the balance of the military power between the Taiwan Strait has changed, and what is worse is that the gap between the U.S. and China has been narrowing down. So I think this is the major difference that we are seeing here. And Xi Jinping has been, now we are entering a danger zone because Xi Jinping now has entered his third term, and he has broken this kind of convention that each generation lasts for only 10 years. So he gave his enemies within the party the biggest reason or the legitimacy to unite against him. So, for the coming 5 years, whatever he has been doing, whatever he has been done wrong, will be the target of the enemy within the party, and they will use this to mobilize the other factions within the party to attack him, and to respond to that, a war becomes a very convenient tool in his toolbox. What kind of war? Well, for Taiwan, it has ultimate legitimacy within the hearts and minds of the CCP party members, because they have been claiming that Taiwan to be part of China. This is the first thing. And second thing is India. What Sana has just mentioned is that I think for the Chinese, in the Chinese mindset, India is an easy target, because we have been trying to, India for the past few years, we have been trying to show our friendship to them. If we should respect each other, we should take care of each other's sensitivity, respect, and mutual interest. And the Chinese know us. They say, whatever we do, you will come back for us. So we will be hard on you, and whatever happens, India will come back to us. So I think we have to change our mindset on this.
That is a big ask, Sushant Sareen. That is not going to be easy, because despite Galwan, despite our banning a lot of their apps, etc., India's imports from China have been at an all-time high. We may have tried to reduce our dependence as far as critical drug or the base drug is concerned, and we've from 70% we brought it down back to about 52% and further down. But as far as the pharmaceutical ingredient is concerned, but overall, we've not reduced our dependence. We have actually increased our import bill from them.
So, Anand, one, I think the mindset in India has changed. It has been changing for some time, but I think after 2020, it has changed irretrievably. Now, just because you talk softly does not mean that you will not carry the big stick. And I don't see, it's one thing to, engage into that Punjabi kind of rhetoric with the Pakistanis, because that's the language they understand.
Right.
But quite another on how you are dealing with China. So yeah, you will speak nicely to them, you will speak softly, you will keep the doors of diplomacy open. But have we lowered our defenses along the borders? I don't think so. In fact, if anything, we have strengthened our borders, we have strengthened our defenses. If you look at the kind of mobilization and the force arrangement along the borders, it's pretty impressive. And this is all along the borders, number one. Number two, the kind of infrastructure we are building. Number three, the kind of, I won't call it alliances, but the kind of networks, if you will. Even that's not a very correct word, but we are engaging with many of the other countries, the Quad being one example. And I think that does indicate the direction which India is moving. On the issue of decoupling, I could not agree more with you that yes, we need to decouple ourselves economically from China, and the faster the better. But I suppose it's one thing to talk about it and quite another to do it. I think a lot of effort has been made, is being made, but I think it will take time, because for over 2 decades, we have decided to outsource all our manufacturing to China. Even Indian companies thought it more profitable to get stuff manufactured in China and import it into India and sell it under their brand name.
Yes.
Because many Chinese brands don't sell very well in India, because of quality concerns and others. But many Indian companies were doing it. Now we need to move that manufacturing back to India. we need to make it more competitive. And that, I think, steps are being taken in that direction. Are they being taken fast enough? Perhaps not. And I think there's a lot more we need to do, but I think we are getting there. But it's not just us, Anand, who has to decouple from China.
Indeed.
I think you are seeing efforts at decoupling happening in the West as well. Whether it's the US, whether it's Australia, whether it's Japan, whether it's the European countries, efforts are underway to start decoupling. And that is why manufacturing is moving out of China and moving into countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, India, many other countries. And I think that is something which is going to have an impact going forward. Does this mean that this will change the Chinese calculus? Perhaps I would go along with both my esteemed colleague Sana, and it's good to see her on Indian television after having followed her on Twitter for quite some time, and Dr. Lu. I think what they are saying is correct. Xi Jinping might be the strongest at this point in time in his career.
Right.
But I think once you reach the apex of your power, then it's only a slippery slope down. He's not going to go out retire. He's going to go out in ignominy. Now, whether that ignominy comes because he fights a war which he cannot win, or it comes because his rivals within the Communist Party overthrow him and gang up against him, it's very difficult to say what will bring about that fall. But I think nobody lasts forever, and neither will he.
No, whether nobody lasts forever or not, the next 5 years he is going to be there. And Andrew K.P. Leong, does he want India on his side, especially when he's trying to change the new global order? When China is trying to say that they want to replace America as the next big hegemony? And of course, when we are seeing a region full of turmoil, he may have blown up or amped up Taiwan to try and build up sentiment internally, because that's what helps you, especially if you have a lot of detractors within. But going forward, can he continue to be expansionist in his designs? Can he continue to try and salami slice into Indian territory and hope India will continue to be an able ally?
Well, if you read his 2-hour speech carefully, the vast majority of his speech is focusing China's internal challenges. In spite of the fact, of course, he has recapped the achievements under his tutelage. His GDP per capita has doubled during the past 10 years, and China's contribution to world growth is reaching something like 38%, more than all the G7 countries combined. But having said that, I mean, he admits that there are huge problems within China in this new area of global change, including, for example, the continuing problem of corruption and the mantra that he's using corruption just to do down his enemy is really a travesty of the whole truth. But having said that, he also underlines that China's wish is not just to exceed any other country or supplant any country. Of course, he admits that all countries, big or small, has their own individual interests at heart. India would defend its own interests, China would defend its own interests. And nowhere in the speech you find that he's being antagonistic against India. And in fact, there are areas of common interest between China and India. And look at even the approach to the Ukraine war. Both countries are not playing by Americans' playbook all the time. So I think that what President Xi highlights is a world in which there is no longer any unipolar version of how to govern a country or what kind of model should be practiced by all countries regardless. So each country should look after itself and try to bring better lives for its people. And in fact, a large proportion of his speech is devoting how to improve the lives of the Chinese people, both economically and culturally and environmentally. So I think that this is a lot of misreading of China. And the biggest misreading, of course, is in the West, in the national security white paper that's just been published in the United States. Each and every page 48 pages in all, China is painted as an existential threat. But as President Xi was trying to say, that China is not the main interest. Is not to exceed any other country. Is to bring China better lives to its people and to bring China to a higher level of development.
No, but bringing better lives for its people or for whoever who are loyal to the Communist Party and the PLA cannot be at the cost of India's sovereignty and India's interests. And this is where the bigger question is, that is China going to act in its own interests at the cost of India? Yes, there may be a point of view as far as the US hegemony is concerned and the US narrative is concerned. And that's why, and to keep it long, I'm not looking at what America is saying. I'm looking at it purely from what is going to be India's view and India's worldview. And we are the nations who are neighbors. America is halfway across the globe. It may be trying to assert its influence here. But what are the equations that India and China are going to have with each other? Because so far China looked at India as dispensable, not even as a worthy adversary. It looked at it as India as a weak nation with a huge amount of population but no ability. But that's all changing. And if India is asserting itself, then will China look at it as an opportunity or as a problem? And therein lies the difference, Roger Liu.
Well, if India is becoming more assertive, will China view this as opportunity or a threat? Well, I would say that China has been trying to play the world politics as a chessboard. And they have been playing a lot of chess around us, India. Well, we should look beyond the LAC. The LAC is just one of the battlefields or the battlefronts that we are facing along with China. What is more important is around us. The IOR, the Indian Ocean region, our neighbor countries, including Bhutan, including Maldives, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Pakistan. And China has been trying very best, using any chance that we have lost to infiltrate, to consolidate their support with our neighboring countries and offer them opportunities to counter against us. Well, from the perspective of these smaller countries, of course, these are chances. But when Chinese are talking about respect, the mutual, sensitivities and interest, and all the other territorial coherence, well, do they think about India in this way? Well, they will not. When they try to expand their influence to India, or the Indian Ocean region, they will do that. In 2018, they have passed out this, what they call the olive branch to India, saying that we should work together in Afghanistan. All right, and we say, well, Afghanistan affairs should be dealt with in a multilateral, basis, and we should not. China and India, the total idea that China has been offering India is China India plus one, which gives an open door for Chinese hand to, to touch upon what should be the Indian core interest in the area, and they thought this is like a friendly gesture. This is not. If India has been doing the same thing, like we will sail to Taiwan Strait as many times as we want. We want to extend our influence to South China Sea, and we are going to do constantly scientific research over there. See what the Chinese will respond to that. They will send out a warship to drive us away. So I think there is a discrepancy here, the strategic perspective that India and China India should especially think about when they are facing the Chinese offensive.
But that challenge is with us, Sushant Sareen, because China doesn't view us as an equal. We may almost have the same amount of population, but do we have the same amount of economic heft and might? Do we have the same amount of military heft and might? Because might recognizes might. That's the reality. We've asserted ourselves only now, but China is leaps and bounds ahead of us. So we've got a lot of catching up to do for them to even take us seriously.
I think that's a no-brainer, Anand. I think anybody who says that we are on par with the Chinese is living in cloud cuckoo land. That's a no-brainer. Yes, there are power differentials and some pretty huge ones. But are those power differentials of a nature that the Chinese can just sweep in and push us aside? If they were of that nature, then they would have already done it, wouldn't they? They've done it in other places. And for people to say that no, but the Chinese are not expansionists, they are only interested within what is happening in their country. Look, I don't give a damn for what they say. I look at what they do on the ground, right? And that is what we should only focus on, whether it's on the Indian Ocean region, whether it's in, on our land borders, whether it's on any other, any other domain. What they do is even more important than what they say. And yes, it is true that the Chinese have always spoken with a forked tongue with us. That is very clear. They say something to us, they try and beguile us. But I think that part of, getting beguiled by what the Chinese say, I think that ended in 2020. At least I hope so. At least that's the impression which we get. Does that mean that we will, continue to have verbal fisticuffs with them? No. But will we take in what they say with a fair degree of seriousness? Absolutely not. We will see what they do on the ground. But having said that, Anand, even these power differentials, they might not be number one as much as what is being made out to be, in at least in the military field. But there are ways and means to actually lower those power differentials.
Right.
Partly through your own tactics and your strategies, partly through the diplomatic engagements you enter into, the diplomatic and the military alliances that you strike, the understandings which you reach, the other multiple fronts which you open. For example, and I've never quite understood this, there was always this diffidence. For example, the Vietnamese were interested in buying the BrahMos missile. Now, I don't know whether there were some licensing problems or there was some other issues. But if there are countries like Vietnam, which are not exactly on the best of terms with the Chinese, who require these kind of missile systems, then I think India should be in a position to supply them. Did the Chinese not do it with the Pakistanis?
Correct.
The entire Pakistani nuclear program and the missile program is of Chinese origin. And of course, some of it North Korean, which was also Chinese. Right? So the Chinese have played this game, and we can very easily adopt certain asymmetric, strategies to pare down whatever advantages the Chinese have. We might not be able to do it completely, but we can do it sufficiently to keep the Chinese at bay, to keep them unsettled. I think there is a lot that can be done in that domain. So let's not get overawed and think that the Chinese are 10 feet tall. They are not. They are just like we are. They are not any different from us. They are as chaotic as we are in many things. Now, just because they have a totalitarian government, does not mean anything.
Yeah.
They can do many things which chaotic democracies like India will not be able to do. Does that mean that we make them 10 feet tall? Certainly not.
Well, in Jiu-Jitsu, they say that you use the opponent's strength against the opponent, and you turn it around and you make the strength the biggest weakness. But Sana Hashmi, right now, the economic heft which China is trying to claim over the years of what it has built is also countered by its own internal issues. Yes, Andrew was right when he talked a lot about what the internal issues of China are, and they need to sort that out. They're also vulnerable because the entire global sentiment is to look at other markets beyond. They have a huge issue as far as large-scale product and dumping which is concerned, and many people are now revisiting the RCEP agreements. But what is India going to do? How is India going to make itself available? The Prime Minister has put out a vision, but are we as a nation ready for it? Are we as a nation ready to underline saying that there are certain territories where you can't come down and settle? So on ground, we also continue to pinprick the PLA, like in Lipulekh, like in Arunachal, like in a lot of the areas. We try and secure more of Gilgit-Baltistan, which it's trying to slowly cut off. We've only got Siachen separating Aksai Chin and Gilgit-Baltistan. And if that happens, then strategically we are cut off from the rest of Central Asia. So there are a lot of issues which we have to also got to address. Are we thinking at that dynamic?
I think India's China policy has been satisfactory, and I totally agree with Mr. Shashank Sareen when he said that we are doing whatever we could do in our best capabilities. And I feel we have to look at China's past approach. Galwan clashes have been heralded as a success, and it's a part of Xi's legacy that China's relationship with a lot of countries has been retrieved, and showcasing that China is responding to countries that are against China. And in fact, India is the only country in the Asian region that could play an important role in containing China, and China is very well aware of this fact. And China's approach has been working to its advantage. And I think it has managed to, India, it has managed to help a lot of countries in the region. I think what India has been doing is remarkable with China. It's not easy for a country like India to share a border with such a bully hegemonic power, but I think India has been managing well. Dr. Jaishankar has talked about diplomacy, and he said that he was a diplomat, he is now the minister, he has to follow the diplomatic tools while dealing with China. In my opinion, diplomacy is working only to a certain extent. We have to rethink our China policy as we move ahead, and Xi Jinping is going to be there for life, at least for his life. He's a president for life. It's just not about 5 years, it's about the rest of his life, I believe. So I believe diplomacy is working and it's temporarily diffusing tensions, but we have to look at the long-term solution. We can't just keep having border standoff and then talking about China openly, all this verbal commentary. I think we need to have a firmer approach, and this is how we are going to stop China. We have to focus on resolving the boundary dispute. Of course, the policy has been not to put the boundary dispute at the back burner anymore, but we have to really think of how to persuade China to resolve the border dispute. And it's a pressure point for China. Whenever it wants to keep India within its boundaries, it just initiates another border standoff. And the intensity is just increasing year by year, I believe. So we really have to resolve the boundary dispute. We have to focus on that.
No, but that is something which the Chinese don't want to resolve. The PLA does not want to resolve this. If they wanted to resolve it, if it was in their interest, they would have resolved it long back. Because the fact that they've not resolved it is that over the last decades, and if you look at it at least more than the last 2 centuries, they have come into India, or what was Indian territory, by nearly 2,000 to 3,000 square kilometers. That's the amount of territory that they've been slowly able to slice over the last 2 centuries. I'm not talking about the last 2-3 decades. So this is something which is important. Shyam Sarangi's report in 2012 says 640 square kilometers of land that they have already moved in, which is sovereign Indian territory since independence. So it's a different story altogether, or since 62, the 62 war itself. So, but Andrew K.P. Leong, going forward, has Xi Jinping decided that he can easily take on India? He does not need India as a friend. In the growing geostrategical dynamic where things are changing, would you agree that China needs India as a friend?
Well, I don't think that India features very highly in President Xi's calculations, because India is the least of President Xi's problems or challenges. Of course, he refers to the change in the global order, and what has led to this change, of course, is the lack of capacity of the United States to call the shots all the time. As developing countries are rising, China, India, and certain and Turkey and things like that. So this is the kind of one size fits all, one country dictates the terms all on all fours is really past. So this and that translates in a great deal of dynamics for relationship between different countries. And I think, as I said at the beginning, each country should defend its own interest, especially national security. But I think that there's a danger that countries can be fixated only on security, fixated on the military, without paying sufficient attention to economics, which transform their lives and livelihoods of the people of the respective countries. And the one major change in the global order is the rise of the developing world. According to the OECD's recent study, the developing world economies would account for something like 60% of the global economy by the year 2030. So I think that one has got to have a larger vision, looking beyond all this transactional or anecdotal.
But the fact is, sir, economics is transaction, and relationships are transaction. The other aspect the other aspect, sir, is that when the opponent underestimates you, you should use it to your advantage, provided you don't overestimate yourself. So I have run out of time, but it's been a very interesting discourse, and it just leaves it at a point where we want to talk a little more. in terms of what should we physically actually do strategically, what it means for India when we are looking at China on the one hand, and we are also looking at this dynamic that is happening with America on the other. Things are on a flux, ladies and gentlemen, and this is why the Prime Minister keeps saying this is India's opportunity, and it is that moment, carpe diem. That's what we need to do as a nation. There's a reason why we had this discussion, because it is important for us to understand the dynamics as Bharat. We're going to take a short break, ladies and gentlemen, and when we come back, we focus on what's happening in Jammu and Kashmir, where again, it's a historic moment when people get up and tear down a poster of an organization that's been the bane or the root cause of all the trouble, and that too because of what happened with Puran Krishan Bhatt. It's important. Big blowback against Pak proxies. Stay with us.